You need to start paying rent now, my parents said. Then I heard, we can't have her thinking she's entitled, as they bought my younger brother a new car. I'm 28 female, and I've been grappling with a situation involving my family, particularly my parents and younger brother. This happened a few years ago, but it still affects me. I wanted to share my story here not just to vent, but because I think others might relate to the unfairness of being the responsible child who is taken for granted. To give you a brief idea, a few years back, while I was still living at home after college to save money, my parents suddenly demanded I start paying rent. I agreed, thinking it was part of growing up. But then, shortly after, I overheard them justifying their decision by saying they didn't want me to feel entitled. Right before surprising my younger brother with a brand new car. Let me walk you through it. I moved back into my childhood home in Lawrence, Kansas right after college. Not an unusual move these days. I had finished a degree in English literature with decent grades, though not with any magical job lined up. I was offered a position at the university library, not a high-paying job, but stable, with decent benefits. I took it and figured staying at home would help me dig out of the student loan hole a bit faster. My parents didn't seem to mind at first. My mom, Denise, ran a daycare from our house and was always busy with toddlers and coloring books. My dad, Raymond, worked at a parts warehouse across town. He was the quiet type, stoic and practical to a fault. Then there was my brother Caleb. 5 years younger than me, he was finishing up high school when I moved back in. Caleb always had an easy way with our parents, charming, careless, with a smile that could defuse any argument. While I had worked part-time in college, pulled all-nighters to keep my scholarships, and took every unpaid internship I could find, Caleb's biggest worry seemed to be getting his Fortnite controller back from his friend Logan. When I moved back in, I tried to do my part. I paid for my own phone, food, gas, helped with the cleaning, and even ran errands for my mom when her daycare supplies ran low. I wasn't freeloading, not by any measure. Which is why the conversation hit me so hard. I came home one Tuesday evening in April, still in my library work badge, damp from the rain, and saw both of my parents sitting at the kitchen table. They looked up like they had something serious to say. My dad got right to it. "We've been talking," he said. "And we think it's time you started contributing to the household a bit more formally. Rent, $500 a month." I didn't argue. Not much anyway. I swallowed my pride, told myself this was part of being an adult, and agreed. Quietly, resentfully, but I agreed. 2 weeks later, I was upstairs folding laundry when I heard my dad talking on the phone in the living room. His voice wasn't loud, but he wasn't whispering either. "I just think it's the right time," he said. "We'll get Caleb his own car. He's graduating. And we can't have Marissa thinking she's entitled just because she pays rent now." I froze. Literally just stood there with a pair of socks in my hands and my heart dropping into my stomach. The next day, there was a brand new silver Honda Civic in the driveway. Caleb was grinning ear to ear, revving the engine like he was in a Fast and Furious movie. I asked them directly. "You bought Caleb a car?" My mom nodded like it was the most natural thing in the world. "He's starting community college in the fall. He needs transportation." I needed transportation when I was in school. I used to walk 30 minutes to class in the snow, I reminded them. "That built character," my dad muttered, not looking at me. I didn't know what to do with the rage I felt. They had literally told me they didn't want me to feel entitled while handing over a $20,000 car to someone who barely kept his GPA above water. I had to fight for scholarships, make coffee runs for unpaid internships, and now pay rent while they were funding Caleb's life like he'd just won the lottery. And the worst part? Caleb didn't even act surprised. Like he had always known they'd come through for him. That same smug charm, like everything was unfolding just as expected. I stewed. I worked. I paid my rent. Every month, I handed my parents a check, watched Caleb come and go in his shiny car, and said nothing. For a while. Then came his birthday. Caleb turned 18 that July. We went to Applebee's, my parents' idea of fancy. As we sat there finishing up dessert, my dad pulled out an envelope and handed it to him. "Something to help you get started," he said. Inside was a check for $5,000. I felt something rupture inside me. Not anger, exactly. Just this deep, hollow sense of confirmation. I had always suspected favoritism. That day made it undeniable. I didn't make a scene. But I was done. Back home, I asked my parents one simple question. "Did I get anything when I turned 18? Mom hesitated. "We gave you a few things. A Target gift card, I think. Some dorm stuff." "Right," I said. "No car. No check. Just lectures about independence." Dad got defensive. "We helped with college." "No, I helped with college," I said. "I got scholarships. Grants. The one parent plus loan in your name? I'm paying it off." They didn't deny it. They didn't apologize either. That night, I started looking for a new place. It took a few weeks, but I found a roommate through a coworker who needed help with rent after her boyfriend moved out. The place wasn't much, but it was clean and small and, most importantly, not in my parents' house. When I told them I was moving, they barely reacted. I think maybe they were relieved. Fewer entitlement issues to deal with, I guess. I moved out quietly. Took my books, my clothes, and whatever little pride I still had left. And honestly, even with a tighter budget and longer commute, I slept better than I had in years. I kept my distance after that. I'd show up for Thanksgiving and Christmas, but I no longer tried to win their approval. I finally stopped trying to prove that I was worth investing in. Caleb? He dropped out of community college after one semester. Said it wasn't for him. Last I heard, he was working part-time at a car dealership and still living at home. His Civic got a few dents, but my parents paid to fix it. Me? I worked my way up. I got a promotion at the library, then a full-time staff position with better pay. I bought a used Corolla with my own money. It doesn't shine like Caleb's did, but I earned every mile. Then, a year later, my dad had a minor stroke. I showed up at the hospital because that's what you do. I sat beside him as the machines beeped and the nurses walked past us without eye contact. He looked tired. Old. More human than I'd ever seen him. "I might have been too hard on you," he said. I nodded. Not out of forgiveness, but because I was too tired to argue. That was the closest I ever got to an apology. I still visit occasionally. But the bond we once had? It's gone. And weirdly, I'm okay with that. I don't know if my dad's near apology was something that weighed on him, or if it was just something he said in the fog of hospitalization. He's never brought it up again, and neither have I. My mom acted like things went back to normal after he was discharged. She called me to ask if I could stop by and help sort through some paperwork for his prescriptions. I did, and we sat in the living room together in silence, thumbing through documents and avoiding any mention of how badly things had fractured. Caleb breezed in halfway through that visit. "Hey," he said, nodding at me, already digging into a bag of fast food. "Thanks for stopping by." That was it. No deeper conversation. Not even a hint of awareness about everything that had happened between us. He sat on the couch, turned on the TV, and started talking about a coworker who got fired for showing up late 3 days in a row. I just sat there, watching him, wondering if it ever crossed his mind how different things might have been if our roles were reversed. My parents never really talked about the time I moved out. They acted like it had just happened. Like I'd gone on a long vacation and forgot to come back. No hard feelings, no closure, just silence and vague smiles when I visited. But the more I stayed away, the more I saw the cracks in the illusion they'd tried to hold together. My mom would call and talk about how hard it is getting Caleb to take responsibility. "He won't keep up with his car maintenance," she sighed once. "We told him to go get the oil changed and he just keeps putting it off." I bit my tongue. I wanted to say, well, that's what happens when you hand someone a car and teach them nothing about ownership. But I just hummed and changed the subject. My dad's health declined slowly after the stroke. Not drastically, but enough. He walked with more stiffness, and got winded easier. At one point, they asked if I could help with yard work when I had time. I did, on weekends when I wasn't working. There was something bitterly ironic about showing up to rake leaves and trim hedges at a house I was once charged rent to live in. Caleb still lived there, but yard work? That was not really his thing, according to Mom. He'd show up at the end of the day, hair perfectly styled, shoes spotless, acting like he'd just rolled out of a photo shoot. I think that's when it really started to hit me. They hadn't just treated us differently. They'd raised us differently. I was held to a higher standard because they believed I could manage it. Caleb was coddled because they believed he couldn't. And in some twisted way, I started to pity him. Sure, he had a new car and no bills. But he also had no idea how the world worked. No clue how to budget, how to apply for a real job, how to follow through. I saw it clearly one afternoon when we were both helping unload groceries. He was fumbling with bags, complaining about how expensive beef had gotten, like it was a personal insult. "Why don't you cook at home?" I asked casually. He blinked. "I don't really know how." That's simple. He didn't know how. He never had to learn. And he was almost 23. My parents still didn't seem to grasp what they had created. They were proud that I was so responsible, often telling their friends about my promotion at the library, about how Marissa's always been the one we could count on. But they said it like it was just something that happened, not something they had actively shaped. They didn't see how their choices, their overt favoritism, their double standards, had sent very clear messages to both of us. To me, you are on your own. To Caleb, you will always be taken care of. There was one moment, though, when things became especially clear. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was visiting to help my mom reorganize her daycare space. She was clearing out some old records and asked me to look through a box of papers she'd kept from when we were both kids, report cards, school photos, drawings. I found a folder labeled Marissa, Scholarship/College. Inside were neatly arranged acceptance letters, scholarship award notices, and a thank you letter from my academic advisor. Then I found a smaller file labeled Caleb, School. It was empty except for 2 school pictures and a note that read, "Caleb doesn't like reading. Not pushing too hard, will find his own path." I just sat there holding the folder, stunned. My mom looked over and gave me a sheepish smile. "He was never really academic," she said gently. "You were always the one who wanted more." I nodded and set the file back down. That's the thing. I did want more. But it wasn't like I was born with a hunger for achievement. I just learned that if I didn't take care of myself, no one else would. My parents didn't mean to create this divide, maybe. But intention doesn't erase impact. I left early that day. I couldn't look at them without remembering how easily they had dismissed my efforts, how they'd told themselves I could handle anything, so they gave everything to someone else. They still haven't apologized. I doubt they ever will. And yet, I find myself showing up, raking leaves, bringing over groceries when my mom's too tired to shop, watching Caleb glide through another week without consequence. Why? Maybe it's a habit. Maybe it's love. Or maybe it's because, deep down, some part of me still hopes they'll see it. See me. But I've stopped expecting it. Now, I do things for me. I work. I save. I plan for a future that doesn't include waiting for validation from the people who raised me. They gave Caleb a car. I gave myself a life. A few months after the daycare reorganization visit, I started therapy. It wasn't a dramatic decision. Just something that had been floating in the back of my mind for years. A coworker at the library mentioned she'd started seeing someone through a sliding scale clinic and how surprisingly helpful it had been. I looked it up, filled out a form, and before I knew it, I was sitting across from a woman named Dr. Varela every other Tuesday, in a modest office tucked behind a dentist's building. I didn't go there to talk about my family, at least not at first. I told myself it was to work on personal growth, stress management, the usual. But it always came back to them. My parents. Caleb. That feeling of invisibility. The mental math I'd been doing since college: if I work a little harder, if I say the right thing, if I stay quiet when I'm hurting, maybe then they'll see me the way they see him. Dr. Varela had this way of asking questions that seemed so simple but hit like darts. Do you feel responsible for maintaining the peace in your family? Whose emotional comfort were you prioritizing when you stayed quiet all those years? What would it mean if your parents never acknowledged the hurt they caused? Sometimes I left those sessions emotionally wrung out. But it helped. Not in a neat, tied-up way. Just helped. Like I was learning to live with the truth instead of trying to rewrite it in my head. Around the same time, something shifted at home, not in the emotional sense, but logistically. Caleb lost his job. Apparently, the dealership had let go of a bunch of staff, and he was among the first. I found out because my mom called me, her voice threaded with tension. He's been moping around the house, she said. Won't look for new work, just sit around. I think he's depressed. I didn't say what I was thinking, that they had coddled him into helplessness. Instead, I asked, is he seeing anyone? A therapist? No, she replied, then paused. Do you think we should pay for something like that? The wording hit me. We. Still the same dynamic, decisions and support were always a collective effort when it came to Caleb. But with me, the standard had been independence and distance. He's 23, I said, trying to keep my voice level. If you think he needs help, maybe talk to him about finding it himself. You can't keep carrying him through every difficulty. Silence. I just worry, she said eventually. He's not like you. You always figured things out. That line, it should have been a compliment. But all I heard was you don't need us. And the truth was, I hadn't. Not in a long time. Still, I offered to send over a few resources. A few low-cost clinics, a couple of career coaching sites, even an online mental health platform. She thanked me. Said she'd pass them along. 2 weeks later, I asked if he'd followed up on any of it. Oh, he's just overwhelmed, she said. We're giving him some space. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. The pattern was baked into the foundation at this point. That spring, I got a tax refund and used it to buy myself a new laptop. Not a splurge purchase, but a good one. For years, I'd been working off an old hand-me-down model that sputtered whenever I opened more than 3 tabs. I posted a picture of the new one online, something simple, just a small celebration. Treating myself, the caption said. A few days later, Caleb commented under the post, dang, someone's doing well. And it hit me. He wasn't bitter. He didn't even mean it sarcastically. He just noticed. That was the first time in years he had acknowledged anything about my life without it being filtered through our parents. I replied with a short thanks. Been saving up. He liked the comment but didn't say anything more. Later that night, I stared at the thread longer than I'd like to admit. I don't know what I was looking for: regret, respect, some hint of reflection? None came. What did come, about a month later, was a text from my dad. Short. Plain. No punctuation. Can you help Caleb with a resume? No hi. No how are you? Just that. I stared at the screen for a full minute before replying. I think it would be better if he wrote a draft first. Then I can review. No response. I didn't hear from them for 2 weeks after that. When I finally did, it was from my mom, asking if I could drop by for dinner that Sunday. I wasn't sure if it was a peace offering or a setup. I went anyway. Dinner was quiet. Roast chicken, green beans, mashed potatoes. Like nothing had changed, like we were still the kind of family that shared casual meals and swapped updates. Except this time, I noticed every detail. Caleb barely spoke. My mom kept glancing at him like she was waiting for him to join in. My dad chewed slowly, looking at his plate most of the time. It wasn't until we were all halfway through dessert that my dad said, "We were wondering if you might talk to Caleb about work. Help get him pointed in the right direction." I didn't say yes or no. I just looked at Caleb. He didn't meet my eyes. "I think I can give you some tools," I said slowly. "But the motivation has to come from you." He nodded, still not really looking up. "I know. I've just been stuck." That was the closest thing to vulnerability I'd heard from him in years. Something in me softened a bit, not completely, but enough. "All right," I said. "Let's start with that." Helping Caleb with his resume was like dragging a sled through molasses. Every time I asked him to send me a draft, he had an excuse: he forgot, he wasn't sure what to put, he didn't want to overhype his experience. Overhype what, exactly? He'd worked retail twice, both times leaving after a few months. But I kept my tone even, and told him to start somewhere. I even offered to mock up a basic template he could edit. He eventually sent me a Word doc that was basically just his name, address, and "great with people." That was it. I didn't yell. I didn't scold. I just added a few bullet points, restructured it, and emailed it back to him with the message: "Fill this out. Add real experiences. Don't send it back until you've tried." He didn't. A week later, my mom texted, "Have you had a chance to help Caleb again? He's feeling discouraged." I didn't respond. Something had shifted in me, and it wasn't anger anymore, it was resolved. I wasn't going to spoon-feed him what I fought for. I'd played that role my whole life, the fixer, the responsible one, the quiet mule carrying the family's burdens. I wasn't doing it anymore. Instead, I started focusing on my life with a kind of ruthless clarity I hadn't allowed before. I picked up extra hours at the library. I enrolled in an online graduate program for information sciences, something I'd put off for years because I thought I had to be available for my family. I stopped dropping everything to rush over for chores and favors. I made time for myself. And the space I created? It filled fast. Peace, energy, confidence, they all showed up like long-lost friends. Caleb, meanwhile, stayed stuck. He applied to a few jobs, got rejected or ghosted, and spiraled. My parents kept trying to help him, paying his phone bill, giving him gas money, letting him keep living rent-free. The same cycle over and over. Eventually, I got a message from a former professor at the university, someone I'd stayed in touch with. She said there was an opening for a special collections coordinator, basically my dream job. Competitive pay, full benefits, room for growth. I applied, got an interview, and landed it. It felt like everything I'd clawed toward finally clicked into place. I posted about the new role, something simple. Excited for this next chapter. The congratulations poured in. Old classmates, coworkers, even library patrons sent kind words. But not my family. Not a word from them. Not even a good luck. It stung. Less than it would have years ago, but still. A tiny bruise on an otherwise proud moment. Then came the moment I didn't expect. My mom called me, frantic. They were behind on the mortgage. My dad had cut back on hours because of his health. Caleb had been unemployed for months and maxed out a credit card. "We're trying to refinance," she said, her voice shaking. "But we need help showing some income support." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already knew. "We were wondering," she said slowly, "if you could co-sign." I didn't speak for a second. My chest went cold. They wanted me, to vouch for them. Put my name and financial credibility on the line. After everything. I asked to think about it. And then I thought long and hard. I consulted a financial advisor, a lawyer, even Dr. Varela. And finally, I called them back. No, I said simply. But, Marissa, my mom started. I love you, I said. But you made it very clear I was on my own. So now, I am. The silence was crushing. And it was everything I needed. They didn't beg. They didn't scream. They just sat with it. I didn't cosign. I didn't send money. I didn't help them fix what they'd broken. And that wasn't cruelty. That was the consequence. In the following months, they sold the house. Moved into a smaller place outside of Lawrence. Caleb got a job at a logistics warehouse, finally working full-time. He got his own apartment, eventually. Small, dingy, but his. Reality, it seemed, had finally called him up. I still saw them. On holidays, birthdays. But the dynamic was different. I was no longer the family fallback plan. No longer the one quietly patching over everyone else's irresponsibility. Then, last Christmas, I hosted dinner at my place. A small group, just close friends and a few coworkers. I made a hearty stew, baked a pie from scratch, and poured wine while soft jazz played from my Bluetooth speaker. My home was modest, but warm. Full of things I bought with my own money. Photos on the wall. Books lining every shelf. Near the end of the night, someone knocked. It was Caleb. He hadn't RSVP'd. He stood there awkwardly, holding a cheap bottle of wine in a paper bag. I wasn't sure if I should come, he said. But I saw your post, and I guess I wanted to see what it looks like. I didn't understand. What does it look like? He glanced around the apartment, his eyes taking in the lights, the smells, the cozy vibe. Being independent, he said. Having your own life. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile smugly. I just stepped aside and said, "Come in." That was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for me, but for him too. But the true victory? It wasn't that they saw what I'd built. It was that I had stopped needing them to see it. I had become someone so whole, so self-defined, that their approval had lost its weight. They say the best revenge is living well. I used to roll my eyes at that. But now? Now I understand. Because I've never felt more free.